I mean, I started talking about the reset in 2009, because that's truthfully when the system died, was in 2007, 2008. And that's when I became a prepper. But where we are right now, it was a huge casino in 2008 that blew up with the derivatives markets, which are just these big leverage bets. There's more derivatives in the system and throughout the system than there were then. There's more leverage in the system than there was then. And now we are absolutely 100% in a risk-on environment, which means everything is getting more and more and more and more expensive, and the currency's value is going down, down, down even faster. Well, you look at even, and I've been traveling around the world. I was in Australia and in Canada and here in the US. What I'm seeing are all of these ads on gambling, right? They're on constantly gamble, 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 with this little disclaimer on the bottom. If you have a problem, the reality is that it has become a huge casino, and so much of this trading is done in the dark pools. I mean, we just went 51.8% of all trades are now done in dark pools, which means nobody has any level of price discovery. Wall Street, we were trained to think that if the stock market's doing well, that is a reflection of what's happening in the economy. And there was a time when that was more accurate. And so we believed that. And now today, does the stock market or the crypto market or any of these markets actually reflect what the general public and what the economy is actually doing, which is contracting? Yeah. Right? I was talking to somebody this morning, and they're not in this space at all, but they're paying attention, and they are definitely looking at gold and silver. And he was telling me that he's been out in the field in his area talking to a lot of people, and what he's hearing is more and more and more personal distress, financial distress, emotional distress, and all of that is really everything that I see happening. I mean, are there wars brewing? I mean, there's so much change. I agree with you. This administration is coming in, making a lot of drastic fundamental changes, and frankly, some that I agree with, some that I don't agree with. And I don't have to agree with everybody and with everything. However, when I look at understanding where we are in this currency's life cycle, I agree with you 100%. This administration is breaking it, and then they will rebuild it. My focus and my goal has to become part of that conversation, so that when it is recreated, the public has more control, like we did when we were on a gold and silver standard. Because if you didn't like what they did, you'd take in the piece of paper and you'd pull out the gold, and that would create restrictions. We need to have that again. The promise was convertibility. Okay, you can carry around this bill. You can carry around this bill. This is a $20 gold certificate, but you can walk into any bank with this and pull out this. And, the Federal Reserve note was trading at the same time, right? At the same purchasing power value, so that people would think that these are all the same. And when they took the gold and silver, when they took the gold away from it, these two went away and that one remained. And people were like, okay, nothing has changed. We are at the end of this great experiment. That was the unique experiment that they started in 1913, which was to control the rate and speed of inflation. And they do that with interest rates. So because there's only one way to fight deflation, that's prices going down, whether it's real estate or houses and how they generate taxes, real estate, stocks, bonds. If those go down, that's deflationary. So they have to prop them up with this. That's the only tool that they have. So if they want to slow it down, they raise the rates. And if they want to speed it up, they drop the rates. And this is the problem that I see right now, is that inflation is stickier. Of course it is. All that money they printed is still in the system. It's evaporated. So the inflation they're finding is stickier. But what are they wanting to do? They're wanting to drop the rates. And the Federal Reserve did drop the rates into an already easy money policy, which is something that they don't typically do. And there's so many things that are hidden like this. What we see in the derivative market is the little bitty tip of the iceberg. It's what's hidden underneath that is opaque and we can't see it, right? That's where the danger is. Not if you can see something coming, then you can get out of the way. That's what I try and do with my patterns, is enable people to see what's coming so they can get prepared to not just survive it, which these transitions are not easy for most people, not easy at all. So get into a position to be as independent. And we were talking about that. And you've made a lot of changes in that regard. And what do you need to have a reasonable standard of living? You need security in food, water, and energy, barterability, wealth. You got to preserve your wealth, community, which is arguably at the very top of my list these days, and shelter. And let's go back a little bit further than that to 2020, right? And when the cerveza disease went rampant and everybody was shut down, what happened to the groceries, right? What happened to your accessibility to the things that you needed? Those supply chains haven't been fixed. That's not an easy fix. And so if you go in, they pull product to the front of the shelf, but if you pull one of those pieces out, it's empty behind it. So you have to, and that's why community has become really so important, because I've been working on this since 2008 because I knew the system died. And so I shifted and became a farmer. And I mean, really, do I look like a farmer? But knowing what happens during these monetary transitions, most of the population, and look around the world, you can see it happening in real time right now, that rise in kids and people going to bed hungry at night in such a wealthy world. That should not be happening, but it's happening more and more and more. The blockchain is about securing, knowing where that comes from and the ownership, and it actually supports digital assets that can be traded on a global basis. And so I really see it moving into really a one world system is what they're going for, that ease of cross-border transactions. And the IMF is frankly perfectly positioned. They've been working on a universal currency, which to me makes the most sense because their SDR, their internal currency, is a basket of global currencies. So we can have a local currency, the dollar coin or the Canadian dollar coin, whatever it is, but then that's easily translated if the SDR does take over as the universal currency. It's easily translated into any other local currencies. Right. So again, if they just came out and said, okay, now the money is going to be this universal SDR, people would understand the shift, that there was a great shift, and they could possibly and probably rebel against it. But if they could keep the currency, it's just like what I showed you here, right? And so when you're looking at the digital, well, they've been taking us off hard assets really since it's a process, right? They can't do it overnight because then you understand the shift. But personal credit cards came out in the 50s, and it was about getting people used to not using this, right? So now when you look at what's going on and the adoption. And the way that they do that adoption is by letting things go up, because then that gets eyes and people are afraid of missing out. And what I see is this is the final adoption piece for enough people to participate to make it easier to transition into those CBDCs.